The following program is a special presentation of the Big Ten Network, produced in association with the University of Wisconsin.
By many accounts, these are dark days for the arts. With the struggling economy, people have less discretionary income to spend. And with a rash of state and federal budget cuts and a dramatic dip in private donations, the arts community is reeling. We'll discuss how arts organizations can rely on sound and innovative business practices to weather the economic storm. Next, during office hours. Hi, I'm Ken Goldstein, professor of political science at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. As the arts face funding cuts and other economic struggles, some worry we are losing an important sector of our society. Joining me today is Andrew Taylor, director of the UW Business School's Bolz Center for Arts Administration. Professor Taylor is the past president of the Association of Arts Administration Educators and a well-known blogger on the business of arts and culture. He has served as an advisor to major arts organizations like American Ballet Theater and the League of Historic American Theaters. He has also been named one of the top 25 most influential people in the nonprofit arts by the Hessenius Report. Welcome, Andrew.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Thanks for having. Thanks for coming by and joining us on office hours. We're going to talk about all the things there's truth in advertising, about all the things we talked about in the intro here. But I just wanted you to define for me and our viewers exactly what we mean by the arts and the nonprofit arts. We're not talking about American Idol here. We're not talking about the movie that I go to the movie theater to see here. It's a different section of culture.
Yes, and I think, well, even in the field we argue about that particular question, but to my mind, the nonprofit arts, and specifically the professional nonprofit arts, which is the world that I primarily engage with, that includes expressive activities and enterprises that either need to charge less than their full cost of operation, or they need a fairly complex amount of different kinds of income to do what they need to do. So all the traditional stuff, symphony, opera, ballet, theater, museums, public broadcasting, foundation work, and then including community-based work. So there's a full range of things that we call arts, and in our program we really don't focus too dramatically on what disciplines are in or out.
So is the simple distinction is if it makes money and it can be self-sustaining just from tickets or advertising, then it's not in your world. If it's everything else, it is in your world?
I wish it were that easy. It's a very permeable, those two worlds. So for example, major performing arts centers in most communities are nonprofits, but the stuff on the stages are often equally mixed. So a Broadway show is a for-profit enterprise, and the next dance company is a nonprofit group, and then you'd have a community group on the stage. So in the real world, the nonprofit, for-profit community just completely cross over each other. So I would suggest, the business we live on is toward the part that doesn't make significant amounts of cash. And really the main thing is it can't cover its full cost through only one market, which is consumers.
We're going to talk a lot about the notion of demand with the not-for-profit arts. But first, where does the money come from? So in the introduction, we talked about there's been cuts, and everyone's aware of the economic struggles that the country is facing and that individuals are facing. But when we look at a local ballet in a mid-sized market, or a small museum, or even a major museum in Chicago or New York, what does their composition of funding look like?
Sure. Well, it varies by discipline. On average, pretty much if you combined all arts groups together, all nonprofit arts, they receive about half their income through ticket sales, through gate fees, through what we'd consider sort of consumer income. And the other half comes from a mix of places. The large value, the biggest one is individual givers, so people who are passionate about that discipline and want to give their personal wealth to make sure it's in their community. And next in line is usually corporate support and funding, either through sponsorship or again through some sense of civic pride. Government plays a role, generally a small role, 5 to 7, 10% if you look at the totals. And that's pretty much where they get their income. And on the expense side, they find a way of doing what they do through having volunteer labor. Their governing boards are volunteers. There's some argument about whether their staff is discount, but they pay less than their commercial counterparts. So on both the revenue and the expense side, they're as creative as they can to get the work out into the community.
Well, let's talk for a second about the role of government funding. Obviously, states are facing budget deficits, the national government's facing a budget deficit, and as you've written and discussed, many of the things that comprise the greatest proportion of the federal budget are largely off the table for political reasons. Yeah. So folks end up focusing on those things which are cuttable, and the arts is one of the things that's cuttable. You said it was 5 or 7%, so a lot of people are thinking that's probably not a huge number. So cut that 5 or 7%, big deal.
Yeah. Well, for some organizations, it is a big deal. Some get no public funding whatsoever, but they do benefit from the ways government spends money on arts and culture. For example, in arts education in public schools, if that goes away, a whole generation of artists and arts workers and arts audiences go away with it. But even though it's very small on the pie chart, government funding really provides often a real strong foundation for essential things that mostly the community wants the arts to do, in reaching people who can't afford to experience opera or symphony or ballet or painting or creative works, and finding ways of connecting it to public education. This is often where the public money goes. Or you read a lot about economic impact, that quite often major cultural investment in a municipality is about getting economic energy refocused downtown. So people come to the show and you're assuming they're going to go to a restaurant and to a bar and maybe buy something while they're there. And there's study after study after study about how that might work.
I want to, we're going to take a break here, but I want to pick up on that because I think that's a very interesting point and almost sort of contradictory. So one is, we should invest in the arts because people are going to go spend more money in the downtown restaurants and generate more tax revenue. And the other saying a good culture should have the arts, should have the humanities just for the sake of having the arts. Yep. Please join us when we come back on Office Hours with Andrew Taylor. We're going to continue our discussion of arts and culture in modern America and the business of arts and culture. Please stay with us.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Where others saw lumber, we recognized a treasure. Where others saw the night, we chose the stars. Where others saw pieces, we unlocked the puzzle that could mean the end of paralysis and cancer. Since 1848, thinkers and achievers at Wisconsin have fearlessly sought ideas that transform the world. Keep on, Wisconsin. Keep on.
Welcome back to Office Hours. We're here with Andrew Taylor from the UW School of Business, and we're talking arts, culture, and business. So those three words sometimes don't go together, as we were suggesting in the last part of the segment. So what's the argument? Do I invest in the opera because I think more people are going to go to the restaurant, or do I invest in the opera because some part of me thinks that a cultured, sane society should listen to the opera?
Well, of course, the short answer is yes, because you are many people, right? So you, as an individual that might have resources and you're passionate about a certain thing, like theater, it was important to you growing up, it helped you connect to school, your children value it, whatever it is, you might have good reason to say, I really want there to be professional grade theater in my community, and there won't be if we're purely built on a commercial model. Or there won't be the size or scope or quality or diversity. You as a taxpayer, that's a different question. So you're already giving money out of your income to a collective purpose, both for the city, the county, and the state, and the federal government. So there's obviously big disagreement. That's forced money taken from you. Should it be given to artistic pursuits? And just like anything else our tax money is spent on, that's open to public debate on whether or not it should be. There's plenty of arguments, of course, to encourage people to think it should be. And there's lots of debate going on right now. A lot of the state arts agencies are getting significantly challenged in their states because the government's saying, you know, we like the arts too, but that's not the role of government to give you our cash.
How comfortable are people in the arts making those economic arguments? Don't worry about the opera, you don't really need to care about it, and it's not important, or you don't have to like art, but We want more people downtown. We want people in the condos. We want people in the restaurants. And it set a dangerous precedent if it's shown that art isn't generating net positive returns, then why support it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the really great producers in the arts and in any part of life, you know, they use the language they need to use to get the thing done. And they can be passionate and committed and truly believe it brings energy to downtown, whether that's economic energy or educational energy or social or personal energy, whatever it is. I think the really smart arts leaders know how to speak the language of the person sitting across the table. And often economic impact is really a goal of the community, and the arts can bring some real energy and positive impact. But you're right, it's an awkward dance, because at the end of the day, people don't go to a museum because it's going to help generate babysitter income. They go because they think there's something of value for them and their family, their community, whoever they're with. It gives them something to talk about at dinner following, and that's important for their relationship with whoever they happen to be with. So it is quite a dance, but as I said, you know, throughout history, the really smart leaders in arts and culture know how to speak whatever language they need to speak, and those that we most admire actually find a way of making that language consistent with what they truly believe and not just a complete left turn.
Let's speak about historical context in a second, but I want to go more about that. Is there a sense of angst in the arts community again? And you've written about some who fear the institutionalization of the arts. What does that mean?
Well, I think people are concerned because, well, certainly our history, and maybe a way to come at this, is really the 501c3, which is the tax-exempt corporate code that most nonprofit arts groups are formed under. Was sort of a retrofit that in the 50s we had this real energy. There was a population really interested in expression and theater and making sure it was between the coasts. And the 501c3 was sort of this opportunity. Look, we can take this idea from zoos and colleges and sort of graft it on this belief we have in the importance of theater or art and museums. It was always an awkward fit because it really wasn't designed. Nothing has been designed for the arts. We just happen to sort of a lot of people call us a borrower's field. We'll take whatever we need to take and we'll slap it together. You know, let's put on a show. We've got a stick, we've got a rock, we've got some duct tape. We can put on a theater show. So it's often both awkward and extraordinary how these things fit together. But yeah, some people are concerned that as you sort of start using other arguments, other than art itself is extraordinary and important. Another argument is it helps students get better grades in school, which it might, but that's not why you do it. It generates economic activity downtown, which again it might, but that's not why you do it. It helps build pro-social behavior. It helps different groups of, in very complex cultures find a common place together, which again it might do, but often that's not why. So these often arts managers and cultural leaders really need to find a way to navigate very delicate and complex arguments, even sort of keeping their own focus and not wandering off the reservation.
Great. Andrew, please stay with us on Office Hours. We're going to continue our discussion of arts and culture, and when we return, we're going to discuss how arts funding has changed over hundreds of years. No 501c3s in 16th century Italy, but there were also people dealing with other incentives as well. Please stay with us on Office Hours.
Great People is our campaign for need-based scholarship aid. It's the key to the long-term well-being of the university as a whole.
In 1970, tuition cost about $500.
Today, it's about $9,000.
We don't want UW-Madison to be a university that is deemed to be out of reach.
The Great People Scholarship gives students a chance to succeed in life.
Support the Great People Scholarship. Visit uwgreatpeople.org.
Welcome back to Office Hours. I'm Ken Goldstein, and I'm here with Andrew Taylor from the UW School of Business, talking arts, culture, and business. So you were talking about how the creation of 501c3s, how people in the arts community jumped onto that as a way to fund arts in the community. The pressure to fund the arts, whether it be opera, whether it be ballet, whether it be painting, isn't a new pressure. It goes back hundreds, thousands of years. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I guess the word I use is compulsion, that actually most artists and creative teams they can't help themselves. They want to create extraordinary work, they want to explore new ideas, and they want to do it in a way that requires more resources than they as a group have. And so that suddenly creates what I would consider a business problem, right? So you have, say, a group of 5 people that needs to create a theater work, and you need much more than the 5 of you together have. So all of a sudden you need to find a way to get other people's money. Because, well, even if you're totally genuine about it, you think it has a real positive impact on your community, and if you're just selfish about it, I need that money because I want to do it this way. So that hasn't been a problem that was invented in the 1950s. That's throughout history. People have been compelled to find new things to say and new ways to say them. And they needed tools or resources or buildings or capital or equipment that they couldn't afford or didn't have access to. And throughout history, we found a bunch of different ways of solving that problem. And because artists are resourceful people, they're happy to change the game every time the game has to be changed. So, way back in the olden days, it was patronage, that either the Catholic Church or the wealthy local landowner thought giving something and helping artists create something either made them look good, or they actually enjoyed it and they wanted to be part of it, or it celebrated the things they wanted to celebrate. Artists didn't mind, okay, I'll paint that Sistine Chapel, that sounds kind of fun. I get to paint what I want to paint within some constraint, and you give me a building to paint. And then that's changed a couple of times over a bunch of years. And in the 1950s and 60s, we as a nation decided this was actually something important for a nation to do. It had a lot to do with the Cold War. The Russians were creating extraordinary art. We need to do that too. So the National Endowment for the Arts started, then a whole series of state arts agencies started, and then national funders started looking at the arts as a thing you should give money to. And that's about when our program started, because all this new cash was flowing into arts and culture, and somebody thought, maybe we should train people to run these places.
So your program's in the business school, and at the risk of simplifying greatly what my colleagues and friends economists do, they're making pretty straightforward calculations in a business model, whether something's successful. And you've written about how we really have to understand in a different way or reconfigure our definition of what demand is. So it's not demand at point 1 in time now, but perhaps demand over 300 years for a particular piece of art or music that's created.
Sure, and it's really, business is a lot of great tools and resources and way of thinking, but at the end of the day, it's a very complex fit with creative expression, because nonprofits have governing boards, and the governing board's job is to make sure the organization is serving its public purpose. That's why they're there. And people ask me all the time the difference between a corporate board and a nonprofit board, and I think one of the big differences is the corporate board knows what success looks like. It is year-over-year growth for the shareholder wealth. That's what it is.
And as a fiduciary responsibility to maximize that
whatever
growth.
we do, at the end of the day, there has to be, the shareholders need to be better off financially than they were at the beginning. And if they're not, then we need to do something. A nonprofit board has to actually define what success looks like, because year-over-year shareholder gain, there are no shareholders. The public is the shareholder of a nonprofit. So they have to actually define what success looks like, and then they have to measure whether they got there. So it's extraordinarily complicated and busy and for them. So for the organization, as you said, it's a trick of trying to figure out, well, what does success look like for this enterprise? What kind of resources do we need to bring into alignment to get it done? And then how do we know if we succeeded? If nobody shows up, but we've created a work that 5 generations from now is going to be considered a classic, what was the measure of success for us?
So for a commercial movie, if 20 people show up and the movie loses $100 million, that's a clear loss. Someone in the other world would say, well, maybe someone will watch this 20, 30, 50, 100 years down the line, and we're willing to make that bet.
Right, because particularly if you're a nonprofit, your job is actually to promote things of public value. And that doesn't mean the public that exists now necessarily. That could be the public that isn't born yet. So you have this complicated math you have to figure out about, this. Nobody liked Stravinsky's Rite of Spring when it was created. Well, somebody liked it, but it created riots. Everybody hated it. This is horrible. This is disgusting. And then we slowly realized it was an extraordinary work of genius. It took us a couple generations to figure that out. So if you're in the moment and you're trying to maximize your profits and fill your house and balance your budget every year, a real thoughtful board has to think about, well, what if we lose money and we want to do it anyway?
Right. And they still got to keep the lights on.
Yes,
please stay with us. One more segment here on Office Hours, talking with Andrew Taylor about business, arts, and culture. Please stay with us.
This program is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. If you have comments about this broadcast, please email them to programming@uc.wisc.edu.
Welcome back to Office Hours, talking with Andrew Taylor about arts, culture, and how arts and culture is funded in modern America. So we've had a long discussion of arts and culture and possible business models. You're at the business school. You run a program for people wanting to get into arts management. Tell me a little bit about that. Do they do the same geeky stuff that someone who's coming in to do finance or accounting does, and then does some specialization with you? Tell me how that works.
Yeah, well, the Wisconsin School of Business is kind of unique in that every MBA student has to pick a career specialization. So there's 10 of them. We're one of those career specializations. Others include brand and product management and applied securities and fun stuff like that. So all of those students go through the same core courses that you would expect: financial accounting and finance and marketing and organizational behavior and economics, all the stuff a business person needs to know. And then each of those specializations sort of circles its own wagons and has coursework and extracurricular experience in that career. So our students come to a seminar, and what we do is we take what they learn in accounting or finance and we say, well, how do those tools work in a world where you're not trying to maximize profit? You're actually trying to certainly maximize income and match things, but you're maximizing something else. And as I said, you have to decide what you're trying to maximize.
So what sorts of folks does this attract? Artsy folks who want a little bit of business stuff, or people who want to play in the arts, or a combination of both?
Well, our program is very, very intensively business focused. So we tend to get people who certainly have a passion for artistic activity or really enjoy connecting communities with artistic activity, but really are almost architects of business. They want to understand how can they bring business discipline and innovation, not to make this a profit-generating activity, but to make it more effective and more sustainable. So we get people who have been working long enough to know they don't like how it works.
We got about 30 seconds left. I just want you to tell me and the audience a little bit about your blog, which is artfulmanager.com. Did I get that correct?
It's called The Artful Manager. I've started it about 5 years ago, back when blogs were young, and now blogs are old. It's really a great place for me to share thinking and to connect with an international audience, and it's been an extraordinary way for me to learn and to meet really cool people. So come and read. So if folks want to keep engaged in this conversation, they can jump on artfulmanager.com. They sure can.
Andrew, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Andrew Taylor joined us today on Office Hours, and thanks to him. And thanks to all of you for joining us. Don't forget, Office Hours is on the web via our university website, Facebook, or Twitter. Take a look and let us know your thoughts. From the University of Wisconsin-Madison, this has been Office Hours. Thanks for stopping by.
The preceding program was produced by the University of Wisconsin in association with the Big Ten Network.